She is an ESPNer turned two-time Olympian in rowing. We are humbled to be in the presence of Meghan O'Leary. She can be found on Twitter at Meghan O'Leary1. And she's on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, an Ash Lanker at Fox Sports Radio, volleyball, tennis broadcaster as well. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So this is going to be an opportunity to showcase the journey, the inspiring journey of Meghan O'Leary and what she's been able to do, from working in television to being a high-profile athlete and following her dreams. Meghan, first of all, thank you so much for being a part of this. And what I see in your career, whether it's whatever it is that there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of commitment and discipline, from reaching where you reached in your TV days to what you've done as an Olympic caliber athlete. How have you found that commitment and found that discipline to whatever you attack with such vigor?
Well, that's a great question. Well, first, Bryan, thank you for having me. It's fun to be here. And yeah, I mean, I think you captured it well. Gosh, maybe I could just, distill it down to being one of three and having two older brothers. But no, I think, I don't know. I think ever since I was a kid, always had that drive in whatever I did, whether it was, a lot of it was in sports, but obviously that's, it's translated to other things as I've gotten older. But I attribute it to family, but also I think I was born with this, half crazy. But obviously, it's benefited me to have that kind of drive and focus and to be able to harness that and really, great ways that have impacted, a journey that was totally unexpected, but nonetheless rewarding and exciting.
So you say the journey in rowing was unexpected. And I go back to our mutual friend in Danielle Crennan, and she was talking to me about you and how the idea of getting into rowing came about and how she was with you when you first started to think about doing this. What was that like? And even how she kind of talked to you about it when those thoughts and ideas were starting to arise within you.
Yeah. So, I always go back to, I was really lucky to have great people around me. Obviously, Danielle was one of them, had a lot of supportive people at ESPN. When I played volleyball and softball, love to hear that you're a volleyball announcer, volleyball and softball at University of Virginia, they have a really great women's rowing program. And the head coach, Kevin Sauer, had, tried to kind of snatch me up. I was in my fifth year. I did a graduate year at UVA. I had an extra year of eligibility. And he said, hey, if things don't work out, you should come out for the rowing team. I promise you'll make the varsity boat by spring and you can be an Olympian one day. So when someone who's successful has national championships says that to you, I kind of laughed it off, but I was like, holy crap. Like that's pretty cool. But it wasn't until years later that, yes, I moved to Connecticut. I kind of started tinkering around with CrossFit, getting on the rowing machine. And yeah, Danielle was like, hey, like Hartford's on a river. You should see if there's boathouses. And, one Google search led to another. And, Riverfront Recapture Community Boathouse was where I showed up in basketball shorts and totally not dressed well for rowing. And yeah, loved it. It obviously, like the cliche saying, but the rest is history. It was a very big, sharp turn in a different direction after that.
So many people, they dedicate their lives to sports to get to an Olympic caliber level. But what was it about you, Meghan, where you didn't really need that much time in comparison to others, where you were able to adapt? I know you had the athletic background in other sports, but you were able to take on something new and not waste a lot of time to get to a top flight level.
Rowing takes a lot, but two things. Three. Let's go back to how we started this conversation. You have to be a little crazy. But one is that you have to be willing to work really, really hard. It's a sport that requires a lot of time, a lot of pain and suffering. It's a hard sport, but then it requires quite a bit of, especially in the pathway I chose, technical, prowess and kind of like an ability to really refine technical skill. And I was fortunate that, the sports that I grew up in also demanded that of me. And so I had at least the raw skills and sort of that, ability to learn really built inside of me to pick up quickly and to, make mistakes and learn quickly. And I do think that, while I didn't spend my life rowing, I spent my life doing all the things that allowed me to be successful as quickly as I did. And I mean, a little bit of luck, a little bit of hard work, but definitely, the right tools in my toolbox that I'd acquired over the years of being an athlete.
So with that, being an athlete leading you to 2016 at Rio, and understanding what you had to go through, endure to put yourself and your body in that position, how do you grasp being able to partake in such a huge, just being there at the games for you?
It's been over 5 years, and it's still, if I'm updating my resume, if I'm sitting in a bio and I write 2-time Olympian, it's sort of like, that's not me. It's still, I mean, it befuddles me. It didn't hit me. It really hit me, I guess, at the closing ceremonies in Rio. And it was this sort of like very just like fantasy like moment of, it starts raining a little bit. There's all the colors in the country and flags. And I kind of had this moment of like, oh, wow, this just happened. Like I could finally breathe, because the whole time you're just, you're working so hard one day to the next, you're exhausted. And then, you get to the dance, the big dance, and you're so caught up in sort of like, I got to perform. And then, you enjoy yourself. And then I had a moment to sit there, and it was just sort of not life flashed before my eyes, but the past like 5 years had flashed before my eyes in that instant. And I allowed myself to like kind of pat myself on the back and be really proud of what had happened, what had transpired. And it was a very emotional moment. I mean, I was brought to tears just by myself sitting there. But it was one of those moments that I'll remember forever, as sort of like, if I could just ball it up into a little piece of rice and like just kind of hold on to it, it was all that I wanted to feel. And I'm so glad that I did, because I can recall it and be, really, really proud and happy about the journey that I had that led me to Rio, and obviously thereafter. But it's still kind of like, it's still weird for me. There's still like a little bit of a disconnect that actually happened.
Meghan O'Leary is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. As hard as the journey has been, just from a rowing perspective, when there were times where your body was like, why are we still doing this? Or the training was so hard and you're like, what am I doing here? What led you to just keep pushing? What was the voice in your head that just said, hey, we got to stay with this?
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to, if you want something bad enough, and that doesn't have to just be sports. It can be a promotion, it can be family, it can be whatever you want. When you really want it, nothing gets in your way. Of course, there are days that are just like, I can't keep going. But then when you really, that's naturally going to happen. Those thoughts are going to pop into your head. But then when you really break it down and you entertain that pathway and you say, well, what if I do give up now or stop chasing what I really want? The consequences of that are far greater than the pain, the suffering, the boredom, the exhaustion, whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment. And I think that's what I kept coming back to is, I'd had this dream as a kid. Like I wanted to be an Olympian, which is big. I mean, now there's so many more opportunities for women in athletics, but that was the pinnacle for at my age when I coming up for a female athlete. And so I kept kind of calling back on that kid, the 8-year-old, 6-year-old Meghan O'Leary. And she would be so disappointed. I have this opportunity. I can't give up because I'm tired, So yeah, I mean, you kind of start playing mind games, but you really get down to it. You just have to entertain like, well, if I give up, am I going to be okay with that? And that's really what drove me on.
How did working at ESPN make you better suited to be an Olympian?
That's a good question. I mean, working at ESPN is a grind. I think all my other ESPNers and anyone in sports media and sports, business can attest to that. And, I think that I understood how to show up every day, and I understood the impact of that. You can't, there's no freebies, because it's so competitive. I think so many people want into sports media, sports business, into professional elite sports because it's highly desirable. And so it's competitive, and that drives you to bring your best self every day. And so I knew, I was lucky enough to get that first job at ESPN, and then I had to grind, to continue to prove myself and to pave the path that I wanted. And that easily translated to, returning to an athletic path, because, you don't get any freebies. There are plenty of people out there that want your seat. And so it keeps you working hard.
What did that grind look like specifically for you at ESPN as you got there and you knew the hours you would log and what it looked like from your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I started as a PA, so a production assistant. So, I was carrying, it was lots and lots of hours for, I'll say it, crappy pay at the beginning.
Yeah.
You make it up a little overtime. I think things are changing, and so, you kind of, you knew what you were getting into. I mean, certainly I didn't fully know, but I was young and I had plenty of energy and I could stay up late, and it was also exciting. But, yeah, when you're spending 6 out of 7 days working long hours, it starts to add up, and you start to kind of have to recognize, well, like, okay, I'm sacrificing this for that. And you don't have much of a social life. And when you're in your early 20s, and your TV family becomes your family. But those were all things that they were negotiated. I don't even like to say sacrifices, but compromises for the dream that I had. And at that time it was right to become, whether it was a big feature producer or a big exec in ESPN. And so it was all things that I knew were the small stepping stones toward the big pad that I was trying to get to.
Is that something that you still want to work towards, or where are you right now as far as everything you touched is so successful? So I know that you've had so much of your time designated to being an athlete, but as you look into the future, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, this is the hot topic, right? The hot button question. So, rowing obviously brought me, I did have to step away from ESPN to really pursue it. In that time, I was able to cultivate a second career. And through what I knew, and, I went from being a PA into programming. So sort of like the business of TV, into a startup technology career, software career. Big cliche, moved out to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. But I love knowing that, like, hey, those 5 years at ESPN actually set me up really successfully for what I did in co-founding a startup. Since I got home from the Tokyo Games, I've been using both my ESPN and my, 7+ years of startup experience to consult and advise and support other startups, coincidentally, both in sports and technology. So it's a nice little marriage of my background. But yeah, I am looking at what's next. I've always loved storytelling, and that's what brought me to ESPN. That's what brought me into understanding the power of media. And we see that more evident today than we did when I got my start. And so definitely entertaining, sort of whether it's a back to an ESPN, or there's so many other, kind of opportunities to apply that interest and that skill set, whether it's, now you see the innovations in sports media and sports technology. And so that's, got kind of some irons in the fire and figuring out the big step next, but have really enjoyed being able to combine what was, sports media experience and then this technology startup experience with the few startups that I'm working with to try and get them up and going and successful. It's really rewarding.
I can't wait to see what's next for you. It's going to be big time. And I hope you remember me when you reach that. No, but Meghan O'Leary is with us. I am Bryan Fenley. And as far as you really loving to storytell, and I think we've had some fun stories already being told in this conversation, but if you were to wear that cap again and think about that big decision once again, from going from ESPN to being a rower, how much pushback did you get when you were seriously tinkering with that decision?
I mean, the pushback was mostly from myself. I was really lucky. I think I'd proven myself as a good employee at ESPN. And when I sat down across from my managers and, my team, Kevin Lopes, Roz Durant, Dan Margulis, shout out. And, I got the okays from even the higher ups. I felt really supported because it's scary. It was my first big girl job too. I'm leaving a career path that I'd set out for myself. But to have the support that I did from people I respected and worked with, and was really meaningful. And then again, supportive family, supportive friends, people, they were kiddingly saying you're crazy, not like, do not do this, you're crazy. And I the final, of course, Danielle was part of my advisory council when making this big decision. Kim Blue Terrell, who's since left ESPN as well, but she was in HR, and I remember sitting in her office and just, she's one of my greatest friends, but sitting in her office and saying, I have to leave, and just bawling my eyes out because I knew that it was the right decision, but I was terrified, sad. I was taking this huge risk, and it was this emotional moment, but it was really meaningful to have the support. And she just said, you finally made the right decision. Because it took me like a year and a half to get there. But I was, like I said, I was really lucky to have good people, saying like, yeah, it's okay. Like, go do this thing because this has a timestamp on it. This you can come back to. And that was kind of the final, like, oh yeah, it's clear as day now.
Knowing that you took those risks, knowing that you really don't have any regrets at this stage, what level of peace do you have with what you've done?
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because Tokyo was not the performance I wanted it to be. It was really disappointing. I'm smiling now, but I'm like dying inside. But I learned a lot from even the bad experiences, and I still see success. Like it was never about the shiny token or the medal. It was always about like reaching the pinnacle of my potential and what can I do with what I have, and the work that I can apply. And so with that, I absolutely have peace. And it's never been like the selfish pursuit of what ranking I can achieve or whatever that, a big part of as I entered into rowing was, holy crap, like I can make this better in ways. And that is honestly, like, I'm really proud of the work that I did off the water and improving hoping to help improve the sport, in terms of, although, there's a lot of ways to go, in diversifying the sport, making it more accessible. And that's where I put a lot of my passion that wasn't put into training. And for that, I am very proud and can kind of find peace with the time, the decade that I spent on rowing and step away for a while, which is nice.
How do you deal with, you're so competitive, and then obviously, as competitive and as successful as you are, I mean, from an internal standpoint, there could always be that feeling of it's not enough or you can do better. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that side of you that is just like never satisfied? And not that you ever want to be satisfied, but coming to like, I did the best I can, dealing with those two sides of your mind, one saying that, you should have done more, or, hey, you should be happy with what you've done, and in dealing with that dialogue in your brain.
Yeah. I think it's what's driven me to go, to like, okay, this happened. You did what you could. Now go apply this, like, whether it's right, it is the dissatisfaction of ultimately, and like you said, like, never going to reach that, but can that be the driving force for you to do something in a different area and make the impact, or, learn something new about yourself? And I do think, without being too scattered with it, I think that's what's helped me keep moving forward. Right. Because I think if you get too bogged down in sort of like that disappointment, man, it's paralyzing, and it can keep you there stuck in mud. And that's okay to feel that way for a little bit, but you got to keep moving forward. And I think, especially for athletes, I think we all struggle with that a little bit. But I do think that if you can harness that, that whether it is dissatisfaction, disappointment, frustration into your next move, it's really, really powerful. It is like a nitro blast that can, make you tackle the next challenge, albeit probably in a different area. But it is, in my experience, it's the healthiest application of that, what can be negative energy into like a positive force.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah. Meghan O'Leary is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. Meghan, I got one more question here for you. The power of your story and that you've talked about today, how do you want it to inspire others?
Yeah, this has been the greatest surprise or gift, I think, of of the last 10 years was that people that I didn't know, people that I did know that I looked up to, took the time to reach out and say, hey, I know nothing about your sport. I don't really like it, but your experience and your journey, it encouraged me to step away from a unhealthy relationship because it was scary, it was risky, but I know that I could do it. It helped me to lose weight. It helped me to demand a better job or whatever it was. And that is the greatest gift. And that's why I'm like, I don't care about the gold medal, but I care about that because that's really powerful when I hear those stories and for me, that was the biggest thing that I think that I also gave myself was like, hey, you have the ability to do really scary things that you know nothing about on this day, but can figure out a lot about. If you add the days up, add the steps, figure out a path and create this whole different, existence for yourself, if that's what you want. And I think that narrative or, that experience is applicable to everyone at every stage in their life. And that's been, I think, the most rewarding thing that this has not only given myself, but that others have shared with me that, have, whether they've just followed me on Instagram or whatever it is, that, has just been really, really meaningful.
There are the things, there are the medals, there are the awards, the accolades, but it's the people ultimately that you move that makes, as you said, everything so much more rewarding. And how humbled I am to have you on here and to tell your story. And your story is just getting started. You've got so much in front of you, and I can't wait to see it. And we'll have to have you on again. Meghan O'Leary, I'm Bryan Fenley. Meghan, thanks again for doing this. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Bryan, it was a pleasure. This was super fun. I'll come back anytime. Thank you for having me.